I played this tournament a few weeks ago at the Austin Chess Club, and I've been meaning to make a video about this for a while, and I think it's a pretty cool experience. Again, this was my first over-the-board USCF tournament ever, and so this time my opponent was this 1,000 rated player. He was like a old dude. I would say maybe in his like 50s, 60s or something like that, Indian guy. And I thought this was like a pretty interesting game. Overall, it was a pretty smooth victory. Just to like do a quick speed run for you guys who have like low attention spans. I'm just going to speed through this game right now. You can see here like a few blunders made by Black early on in the game. But I wanted to like talk about the thought process, some of the moves that were made. This is not the move. So here I actually set the game up wrong. So it's actually F5 here. Then stack the rooks. And we end up getting this really nice checkmate here in the middle of the board, which I thought was pretty nice. We didn't have to go into endgame here, didn't have to convert like a pawn up, exchange up, or anything, anything that took a lot of work. Instead, we just found a nice checkmate here in the middle of the board. So I started this game off by playing e4, and I was wondering what my opponent would play. And my opponent here plays the Sicilian. And against the Sicilian, I've been really liking this c3 Alpin move recently, especially because thanks to Daniel Naroditsky, I now actually have something against the main line. One of the main lines, at least, which is the knight f6 line. I've been watching Danya's videos. He's got like a great series on what he calls like the Stoles attack here, which is like where we push. The knight jumps in. We've got this bishop move here attacking the knight, and then the line goes something like this, right? We've got like a we've got like a pawn here on c4, and we might generate some counterplay here with the a pawn kicking the black knight out, driving the pawn a pawn down the board, and we have ideas to play d4, um, and yeah, if you're interested in that, I would go check out Daniel Naroditsky's channel. I'm still practicing this. I'm not 100% familiar with it yet. But, neither are your opponents when you play something that you don't know. If you don't know the opening and your opponent also doesn't know the opening, then like your ignorance and their ignorance, they kind of like, it cancels each other out a little bit almost. And you're both kind of just like trying to play the best moves and trying to figure out like, okay, what are the right moves? Anyway, so I mean, I don't get this, right? And one of the reasons I like this Alpin setup so much is because oftentimes your opponent, they don't play the critical main line, which is knight f6, immediately attacking this pawn in the center, or uh, d5, also immediately attacking the pawn in the center. And so if they don't, right? If they don't, then what you do is you end up just getting, for example, in this game, my opponent played knight c6. Oh yeah, I have like a score sheet here, by the way, for you guys. Okay, it looks like the camera's having a little bit of trouble picking it up, so we're not gonna show the score sheet for the camera. Um, but the point is, if they don't play the critical main line in the Alpin, if they don't play knight f6 or d5, they just casually play like a developing move, like the knight on c6 here, for example, then all of a sudden we're going to play this move d4, and we're going to have a big fat center. We're going to have two pawns in the center of the board. And when we have two pawns in the center of the board as white, we're always very happy because we have all the options, right? We have all the um, fun in the position, and whenever they try to put their knights onto like the classic developing squares, like f6, c6, we're always going to have the opportunity to push forward and just challenge the knights and either send them onto a worse square than they were previously. Or in some cases, like we could outright trap the knights or send them onto a square where they could be forked or lost. And generally, you'll just have like a lot of fun winning tempo against your opponent's pieces, which are not going to have many good squares to go on since you control the entire center. So our opponent here, again, like 1000 rated, he doesn't know the main line. So he lets me get this big pawn mass in the center. He takes, I take, and plays this check, right? He plays this check. I block with the knight. He goes for this knight e7 move. And when this knight e7 move came out, I was pretty happy to see this move, right? Because he's not really actively fighting for the center with the pawns here, and he's still giving me the opportunity to go d5. Now, I end up going for this pin, which the computer says is the wrong idea. So I end up analyzing this game with the computer after the fact, and this pin is actually wrong. You'll see that the computer says I'm supposed to actually strike in the center immediately. I'm supposed to play d5, d5. You can see the engine says is the best. And basically, I got like a little confused here. I thought, it wasn't time to play d5 yet because I thought after takes, after push, takes. For some reason, I forgot the queen could take the knight. I just didn't see that. Um, I probably hallucinated a little bit. I just, for some reason, thought that the d5 square was protected one extra time than in reality it was. So I don't go for that. Instead, I go for the pin here, which computer says is not good. But the white still has the advantage here, right? So it's not the end of the game. So he kicks my bishop out, and I just want to keep the pin here. I want to keep his position tied down, stop his knight from moving, and maybe eventually, d5 is still on my mind at this point in time. I'm still thinking about it. I just, for some reason, I don't see that I can play it here. So my opponent castles, and now I actually end up playing d5, right? Which is funny because the computer, at this point, d5 is actually a mistake. Although the reason why it's a mistake is kind of, from an intuitive level, actually, it makes sense that d5 would be a mistake here because my opponent is castled and I'm somehow not castled, right? I wasted a little bit too much time here in the opening, violating like my own rules, like what I like to play by, get the pieces out quickly and castle. Right. So from an intuitive standpoint, whenever you're behind in piece development, right, when you have less pieces out than your opponent, and when you're not castled, and when your opponent is castled, right, so his king is safe, my king is not, you're not really supposed to be opening up the center, right, like this, and making pawn trades in the center, allowing potential of rook to come onto the e file, and just like bad things could happen to your king. So intuitively, it is bad, okay? Guys, intuitively, this is a bad move, but this game we actually end up getting away with it. And to show you guys like why this is a bad move, after ED, right? After ED, there's this Queen A5 move, which is apparently nasty, sacrificing the knight for black. Okay, that's how good it is to be castled versus not castled in chess. Being castled here, right, is so strong that the computer actually says you can sacrifice an entire knight as black. You can totally just say, okay, I'm gonna give you this knight for free because your king is gonna be so weak, right, that when you take this knight, hey, you're gonna waste one too many moves, and your king is going to get into big trouble in the center of the board. So after D takes, right, after apparently the computer says just to take, uh, and then we have this takes, check, and let's say we block. So we can't block with the queen here. And if we block with the knight, right? What happens is actually black comes here with this knight f5 move, attacking the bishop. And if you try to save the bishop here, if you try to say, hey, um, I'm not going to give you the bishop, I'm going to put the bishop onto a good square, then boom, rook e8 check. And then after you block, there's this nasty um, knight d4 move. And if you castle, right? You lose this with check. So let's say you castle. Okay, boom. You're just gonna lose this with check. There's no queen takes. There's no queen takes because the rook protects, right? And then if you move the king, then this is just all kinds of bad. There's what is there here? There's d takes c6. Oh, just the casual d takes c6. Look at that. The computer doesn't even want knight takes. It just says d takes c6 here. And black is up 2 pawns. But more importantly, black has this like extremely nasty knight here in the middle of the board. There's always a potential check. The queen's active here. Um, this is just apparently really bad. Really, 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 really bad for white. Okay. So we end up like making a mistake, but the reason why that move was a mistake is, well, to be fair, it was intuitive, but in order to see the full reason why it's a mistake, you have to see that like, okay, this knight actually can't be taken, right? So, I mean, is it so easy to look at this and just say, hey, white actually doesn't have time to take the knight? I don't know how easy that is, right? If you're a really strong player, you might be able to see it. But the long and short of it is like my opponent doesn't see it, right? And he ends up taking the knight, which forces me to recapture because that comes with check. And in this position, my opponent goes backwards. And that's a blunder because the knight's pinned, and now I'm going to push forward. And once I push forward, you can't move the knight. Because when you move the knight, you're going to lose the queen, right? And so my opponent realizes, I think, here that he blundered. And so he just, kind of admits his mistake, puts his knight back out, and he gives up his knight, takes the knight. And here I actually play this move that I thought was pretty, this queen d6 move. And this move is pretty because um, you are you are putting the queen onto an active square, but more importantly, you're stopping this d pawn from moving forward, right, everybody? And when you stop the d pawn from moving forward, you're kind of restricting the position. You're stopping the bishop from, you know, you're stopping the bishop from coming onto the square. Um you're stopping the pawn from coming into the middle of the board. And in addition, you're also applying pressure onto this knight, which is now attacked twice. And again, you still can't move the knight because the pin is still um, active, right? So here my opponent actually plays this move f6, blunting the bishop, just kind of like restricting the power of the bishop a little bit, okay, which I thought, all right, that makes a little bit of sense. I put my bishop out. Really need to finish development now. I'm not happy with how long it took for me to get developed this game. It took me, um, even though white is first to move, it's been like 14 moves. I'm still like somehow not castled, right? So that's like unprincipled. That's like not the most principled way to play by me, but I am like up a piece thanks to just like tactics and also controlling the center of the board. So my opponent plays this move, chasing the bishop, and I thought like, hey, if he takes the bishop, I actually don't mind because this bishop, you know, even though you're technically not supposed to give up a bishop for a knight this early into the game, remember the bishop is almost like a little bit better than the knight due to just being a long range piece and being a little bit more useful on a open board and in the end game. I thought that if he takes and I take I thought that if he takes here and I take him back, right? Let's say something like this and this. I'm happy with the knight being on that square because I want to drive my knight there into g6 and maybe support it with the pawn. And in the long run, my knight on g6 I thought would be kind of a monster, right? It would be threatening all kinds of checks. It would be restricting the movement of some of his pieces, right? It would be forcing his rook onto maybe an awkward square because jumping the knight there does come with tempo on the rook. So I thought, like, okay, I'll let him trade, and I prioritize castling here. He does go for the trade, and opponent here does this prophylactic move. He sees that I want to jump into g6, right? he sees that I want to jump into G6 and moves the rook out of the way first. Okay, which I thought, that's fair. But now I play this move F4. And this move I'm pretty happy with because I'm essentially like threatening to like roll the pawns down the board and crash through. And either, right, I'm thinking here in this position, either I push and he pushes, and I end up, controlling like a lot of squares on the king side, and very importantly, opening up the light square diagonal. If you can imagine something like, if you can imagine something like push, right? Well, okay, so technically it wouldn't open the diagonal, but after push, I thought like I have a very strong pawn chain and I'm controlling important squares here. And maybe, I was thinking here also maybe even lifting the rook up and lining up with the king here, and maybe driving the other rook um into the action as well. So just, taking space, keeping some ideas alive, pushing the pawns up. And obviously if I push, right, takes, I'm happy to take this way, allow the trade, reload on the F file with tempo. Not with tempo, but just like getting the rook into the game, controlling the only open file. So everything here I thought was pretty good. Opponent goes for the C pawn. I'm not concerned about him taking the C pawn, right? I thought that was too slow. I'm just gonna start blasting here. I was thinking about driving the bishop in. Um, I was thinking about driving the knight in. I'm really trying to figure out how to checkmate here, right? How to squeeze the most out of the position. And meanwhile, look at this. His rook is still trapped and the bishop's still trapped because the queen on d6 is just, it's a monster. It's stopping the pawn from moving and it's just tying black's entire position down. So I was pretty happy about that. I let him take that pawn. I wasn't concerned about it. And here I place the rook on c1, bringing the rook out with tempo. And yeah, and this was one of the other reasons I let him take, because I thought if he took and he lets me put my rook on c1, he'll have to waste another turn moving the queen here. And once he moves his queen back, then I have like even more time to squeeze juice out of the position. So I jumped the knight in, right? Wasn't sure exactly what I was threatening, just putting my knight closer and closer to his king. Maybe, maybe coming in here with a fork. By the way, this rook is now attacking the bishop, and the knight is also attacking the bishop. So the fork actually would be winning, the bishop if he doesn't take the knight here, losing the exchange. And so our opponent goes back here, and here I play another move that I was like pretty happy about. I'm just driving the rook into the position, right? Rook is protected by the queen, and now like his entire position is just completely sealed. His queen has no room to move around. It can't go here. It can really only go to these squares. So I'm really restricting again the activity and the potential squares and the potential movement of the black pieces. And here he goes king up, right? Not king up. He doesn't go king up. Or actually, here he goes king. Oh, okay. So it's not rook c7 yet. So that wouldn't. So here it's actually here, 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 here. Yeah. So opponent plays f5 in this situation. Opponent plays f5 here. He doesn't go king h7 because king h7 would be a blunder because it will walk into this check by the bishop, right? It will walk into the check by the bishop, and you don't really want to give the free. You don't really want to walk into the discovered check here. So instead, he plays this f5 move, okay, which blocks the bishop. Okay, I thought that was like a pretty good move. It was kind of annoying, right? Because now my bishop looks kind of dumb here. It looks pretty useless just staring at the pawn. So here I play, I was like, okay, I'm gonna worry about the bishop a little later. I just bring the rook into battle. And now, right, the queen is tied down. We have to think about resource allocation is like one metaphor that I've started using recently. So even though we're not winning, for example, the bishop outright here, right? Black, in order to defend the bishop, he has to commit resources to defending it, right? So if you think about it, this bishop is being attacked twice by my two rooks, and it's being defended for sure twice right now by the queen and the rook, right? But the fact that black has to spend an entire queen here defending the bishop means that the queen isn't free to go and do like other important things, right? It's tied down here to the defense. So even though, like, for example, I'm not winning the bishop here on the spot, I'm not threatening to win the bishop. It's forcing black to commit like huge amounts of like resources for the purposes of like defending like a game-winning threat, right? Which is something that we're always happy to do, right? We want to force our opponents into making awkward moves. So here my opponent goes king up. He's attacking the knight. He's threatening to win it. And I have this move here, g4, which I thought like, okay, I was very happy about this. And the reason I play this move is because I realize here that my king is safe. My king is safe because my opponent doesn't have enough firepower to actually exploit the weakness of the king. Usually, you're not supposed to move the pawns in front of your king. They're supposed to act as kind of like bodyguards, protect the king. But here I noticed that like my opponent has no infiltration. He can't go queen h5. He can't go queen um, g5. His other rook is tied down. There's no bishop maneuver. There's no rook here coming onto the g file. So I thought like, okay, well, actually, I'm just going to throw my pawns forward. And if you take, you're walking into a discovered check again. But if you don't take, which my opponent, if you don't take, then I'm going to take you, right? And after takes. So after, for example, if you don't take, right? If you don't take, then I'm going to take you. And after takes, I saw like the queen and the knight were lined up with each other. And I thought basically there were a ton of tactics in this position, and like a knockout blow was like pretty. It was pretty. I saw it on the horizon. Something was like coming. Something was brewing in the position. So the opponent ends up taking the knight, and so that's a mistake. It walks into, according to the engine here, a mate in 11, which I do end up finding the checkmate here. Um, it wasn't in 11 moves, but I take with the pawn here. And taking with the pawn, the opponent can't take back because the queen touches the king here on this horizontal roll. So he has to, and if he steps back, by the way, right, then again, there's the problem of this discover check, right? Opening up the bishop, winning the rook. And so he has to take with the rook here. So after I take, you still can't take with the pawn. He's forced to take with the king here. Right? He's actually forced to take with the king, or he can actually run here or here, but he can't run to either of these squares. So my opponent chooses to take here, and here I drop the queen back. I dropped the queen back because I thought, okay, so my goal is to try to like force his king onto like the most awkward square possible, right? I want to kind of just like drag his king out into the open and force him to stand naked in the middle of the board where he can be harassed by all of my pieces. So I bring my queen here, and the point is I'm covering the critical escape diagonal here, right? So I'm stopping him from running away, and the pawns here. So my queen covers the light squares like that, and my pawns cover the dark squares. And if he wants to take, then I thought, okay, that's good for me because his king is just getting further and further away from safety. So king takes. I have this check, teaming up with the pawn, right? Whenever you have a queen, my instinct is always teamwork, right? We want to use the queen together with one of our pawns, one of our pieces to start getting closer and closer to the king and start setting up these checkmating patterns. The opponent runs and just do a quick scan of the board. Okay, where can the king actually run? So the rooks are drawing laser beams here. The queens is drawing a laser beam here. It's covering this. It's covering all everything here. And the pawn here is covering the square. So I thought, okay, maybe he could go here and here. I'm just trying to trap the king here, trying to score the checkmate, right? And I thought, okay, let's bring the rook in because I want to use all our pieces together as a team. So, my queen I thought was on a pretty good square. I just bring the rook in, improving the position of the rook. I thought that in addition to covering a column, why not use the rook to cover a row also, right? Whereas before, like um kind of the horizontal firepower of the rook was being wasted here. And it was being wasted here and wasn't really contributing to the attack. But now that I bring him onto the fourth rank, he's able to attack horizontally here. And so King goes here. Again, I'm just trying to stop him from escaping, right? I don't want him to run here. So the right check to give is here because this covers everything here. This is covered. He has to take, right? And I thought after he takes, I'll just scuttle the king towards the rooks and try to score checkmate like that. So I give a check here, goes here, and then that's how we end with a checkmate here in the middle of the board. The king has no squares left, right? You can't take any of these. The rooks draw a line here. The queen draws a line here. It covers the diagonal. That's covered. This is covered. Everything is completely covered. And that is checkmate. So that was like a fun game. And actually, I end up winning like a solid 20 dollars actually from this like local chess club, which is like pretty cool. It's like nice to be able to win some money from playing chess. It's not a lot, but it's a start. Maybe I'll compete in like a statewide tournament or like citywide tournament next. Just test the waters, see how I do. And this is the Austin Chess Club, by the way. So I'm Norman Chen, in case you guys don't know. And here we end up winning the under 1600 prize of like 20 bucks, which is I was pretty thrilled about, to go into a tournament and actually win something. All right, so that was cool. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and check back in the channel for future uploads.